So I guess let's get it started with kind of give us your background. I know it's long.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, we'll start all the way in, I guess, high school. So, obviously, me and Jackson grew up playing same summer ball organization. I'm a few years older than him. So, I committed to NC State my junior fall. They were the first team to ever reach out to me. So, committed to them. I was a 6'2", 155, 160 pounds, and I committed like lanky right hander, 86 to 88, like hit 90 at a PG tournament. And kind of that's what got the ball started for me recruiting wise. So kept developing and stuff through high school. Probably left high school in 2017 at like 88 to 90. I was probably 170 pounds. Like I started to focus a little more on the weight room. Obviously, like the progression of what I focused on and stuff there changed as the years went on. But got to NC State in 2017. I threw 88 innings my senior year of high school. Didn't really take any time off that summer. Got into fall ball, freshman fall. Threw decent. Like, I mean, it wasn't anything special. It wasn't horrible either. And my last outing of that fall tore my UCL. So missed all of 2018, rehabbing Tommy John. Pitched all of 2019 as kind of a, I don't know, I midweek starter, closed some games, middle relief, like did a little bit of everything. Um, Threw pretty well, like first competitive season in college. Like stuff was a little better. It was probably 90, 93 with the breaking ball. So like pretty prototypical for the time ACC reliever type sort of deal. Going into 2020, that would have been my first year eligible for the draft. So was really like focused on that. I thought if I had a good year, like there'd be a good shot at me potentially getting drafted, like big school track record of throwing strikes, like striking out a decent number of guys. Tweaked something in my back the summer of 2019 after that season, and it never really got better. Like ended up having a blown out L5S1 disc. Um, it'll resorb for like 90% of people that age. I was what, 20, 21 at the time. Like 90% of guys, it'll eventually reabsorb back into the spinal cord and you won't have any issues. Well, unfortunately, like it never got better for me. So that fall, like threw on it on a hurt back, lifted on it, like probably wasn't smart. Ended up having to have surgery February of 2020, 6-week rehab, slated to put me back probably mid-April. Obviously, as we know, COVID-19 kind of shut everything down early mid-March. So I vividly remember like my first rehab pin after this back surgery, like at this guy's house out in the middle of nowhere, like 92, 95, middle of April, just like, dude, what I would be doing, like what I would do to be playing in a season right now, like probably
Right.
would have had a good shot at least if I would have thrown well, like potentially get drafted. The draft still was 40 rounds, I think, before the 2021 when it was 5 rounds. And
Yeah.
so that kind of changed everything. So then like I said, like was throwing harder, remote trained with Driveline over the pandemic. Felt like that was good for me at the time. Came back to school fall of 21, like my senior year, and was throwing well. Like hit my first 96, like average fastball velo probably, I don't know, 93, 95, I'd say. Like good breaking ball still really no true third pitch. Ended up tearing my UCL again that October, like almost like 4 years to the date. So 2017 October and 2021. Was pretty much like told like, I mean, if you want any chance of playing anymore in college, like try PRP. Like, what's the worst that can happen? So I had PRP done. Um, that rehab was unsuccessful. Like I ended up pitching one game in 2021, like a midweek versus Campbell, and like blew it out completely. My first warm up pitch, stayed out there for like 35 pitches and threw on it. Like, I mean, I thought it was gonna be my last time ever pitching, so just kind of like grinded through that. Couldn't get out of the inning, but that's kind of besides the point. So had was lucky enough. NC State took really good care of me. They offered to pay for like one more surgery kind of on my way out because I'd finished up school in fall of 2020. Like I was done early. So there's really no point in me coming back after 21. So I had UCL repair with internal brace done April of 21. Started the rehab on that. Was like working with our trainer and stuff at school. First day throwing was actually in Omaha during the College World Series, like the day we got kicked out of the College World Series. So that was pretty, like, obviously not fun at the time, but pretty cool to say your first return to throw days in Omaha. So that was sweet. But yeah, got home from Omaha and kind of didn't know what I was going to do. So like always said I wanted to play baseball and always wanted to go into medicine once baseball was over. So like 2 elbow surgeries and a back surgery, and I'm 22. Like I'm kind of thinking baseball might be done. So I'm going to start focusing on this medicine stuff. But like I'll train in my free time and like rehab it. So ended up doing a year of post bachelor studies at UNC Chapel Hill, like not far from Raleigh, and rehabbed it on my own. Used a pulse strap. Like we can dive into like that whole rehab process. I mean, that could be a podcast of its own, but like literally had a pulse strap, a green plyo, I think 3 baseballs and a lacrosse net, and did my entire return to throw like on that. Didn't touch a mound, like didn't have access to a mound. I was at school. Threw my first pen indoors. You were there at that facility in Reedsville, like
Yes.
90-92, good breaking ball. And I was like, dude, I might be able to like do this thing again. So ended up being an assistant coach at a high school in Hillsborough, North Carolina, and rehabbing. Like, so I'd go to class in the morning. I'd go do my rehab throwing and stuff. Would go lift, and then the guys would have practice, and I would do all that. We'd go to games and stuff, and started throwing harder. Like hit my first 95, literally a year to the date from that surgery. Was now starting to be like, all right, I'm going to try to play. Like, we'll see what my options are there. Obviously, like wanted to sign with an affiliate. I didn't know anything about like independent league or anything like that. So was throwing in pins like 3 to 5, grabbed my first 96 in a pin, my first 97 in a pin, like tweeting out videos, trying to see like who's going to reach out, if anybody's going to reach out, like was using any connection I had. Well, the High Point Rockers ended up reaching out to me, independent ball team in the Atlantic League. And I started going out there to throw for them. So like threw a few pins. They liked what they saw. I ended up throwing some lives to some of their hitters. And I think end of July, I signed with them, finished the year out well, threw like 15 innings, first competitive season and since 2019, like threw well. Stuff was continued to get better as the year went on. And then trained that whole off season, like wanting to get an affiliate deal before the next indie ball season started. So like, dude, I was ramped up in early December, like throwing as hard as I could, like trying to throw for teams if that was going to be an option. So I ended up throwing for like an area scout for 2 teams. Nothing ended up coming of it. Went back out to indie ball spring training, threw well there. We started the season, and like a month in, I got a call from San Francisco Giants, like, hey, we're going to fly you out to Arizona for a physical. Like, obviously your surgical history, we don't know, like if you're going to pass the physical, we don't know what stuff's going to look like. So like, obviously super excited, like just got a call from the team I grew up rooting for, like friends in the organization, like pumped about that. But in the back of my head, like I didn't want to tell anybody, because worst thing I want to do is like go out there, fail a physical, and everybody be like, oh, what happened to this guy? So I try to keep it hush hush. The Rockers publicized it, so people found out about it. But go out there, do all the physicals. Ended up passing like impressively, like shoulder, elbow, back, everything looked good. So, got like 10 days in Arizona to kind of get back in shape, because that whole physical process took a while. Went to San Jose, our A ball team, threw well there for 2 months. Got promoted to high A Eugene at the end of the year, threw up like 10 pretty solid innings up there. And then the season was over, and now training this off season, getting ready for my first affiliated spring training. So I'm pretty pumped about it. Like, it's been a crazy road. Like, if you'd have talked to me in 2021 when I was sitting in Omaha doing my first day of throwing, like if you'd have told me I was going to be in the Giants organization, like getting ready for spring training in 2 years, I probably would have told you were crazy. I probably thought I would be getting like ready for my second year of med school or something. But definitely happy to be where I'm at. Like, this is what I love to do. I love throwing, all the science behind that stuff. So yeah, man, crazy road, but it's everybody's got a unique story. So it's always cool to hear like different sides of it.
Yeah. You have one of the like most unique stories I've heard, and it's like super inspirational to me. And I think a lot of guys, I mean, a lot of guys, in our area look up to you, and you always have good things to say and are really helpful. So that's just huge, man. Give back to the game like no one else I know. So
I appreciate it, dude.
yeah, just kind of want to like you talk about like if you could dive in maybe a little bit. I guess you touched on it, but just like just some of the mental side of like all the perseverance that you had to like, use
Yeah.
go through all the adversity.
Yeah. Let me let my dog in real quick and I'll
All
answer
right,
that.
go ahead.
Yeah, dude. So obviously, like, there's a lot of mental challenges that are equally as difficult to physical and like your return to play from injury kind of process. So obviously, as a freshman in college, like you want to be competing with your guys, like it's all brand new and all you want to do is play. So obviously, like the isolation of kind of rehabbing can be difficult. Like you're doing stuff separately from the team. Luckily, my first time through it, I had another guy that had TJ like I think 3 days after I did. So like having somebody there to constantly like bounce ideas off of was like super super big for me. So that made that like isolation process of rehab a little easier.
Yeah.
Um, Trying to think. I know she's going crazy with the toy behind me, but so like for me personally, the hardest part mentally of rehab was like, especially after the second elbow surgery, was re-trusting my body to like function how I needed it to actually perform the way I wanted. So from like a physical standpoint, we can talk about like compensating in different ways based off like injury history and stuff like that. So obviously, like your body's going to want to protect whatever was hurt in the past. So like kind of breaking down some of those physical barriers is important. But for me, it was like there was like a distinct process in rehab where I was literally throwing what I felt like was as hard as I could, and it's like 83 miles an hour, and it's like, dude, at some point you're gonna have to take these like mental e-brakes off, and you're actually gonna have to push, or in my case, it's like you're never gonna get where you need to get. So that was really difficult to overcome. A lot of that comes from like confidence in your preparation, in my opinion. So for me, like especially when I returned to the field and even through rehab, like I knew if my preparation was as good as I needed it to be, like, and I knew in my heart that I had done everything I could have possibly done, like I'm going to be confident in whatever product I'm showcasing that day. So like whether if it's middle of rehab throwing, like if I know I've done everything possible in regards to my mobility, nutrition, sleep, like working out, workload management, like that kind of stuff, like I'm going to have all the confidence in the world. Like when I throw, if in the back of my head, I know like, I should have done something better. Like that's when I would have bad days of rehab, is like, I knew that I didn't sleep as much, or I stayed up too late playing video games or something. Like I wasn't taking it as seriously as I needed to. So finally, once I really like buckled down and got kind of all that stuff in order, and this was kind of right as I was returning to the field with the Rockers, like I knew in my head I'd done everything I possibly could. I'd pushed my limits in rehab throwing. Like, dude, there are times I was throwing like 100 pitch bullpens just so like when I would get in a game, one inning should feel like nothing, dude. Because I'm so prepared. Like I have such a good base that like one inning's not there's no way I'm gonna get hurt. I'm so confident in what I'm doing. Like that was huge for me. So whether that's like workload management stuff, like from a throwing side, or even if it's stuff in the weight room, which has been really big for me this offseason, like building as strong of a base and being as confident in that base is like what has led me to be confident on the field and retrust my body to work like without failing. So, yeah, I think mentally, like trusting in your preparation is one of the best things you can do. Like just having full confidence that you've done what you need to do to get your body and your mind right. Like that's what gave me confidence. So I can't really speak from some of the other stuff. I know some people like have like true mental exercises they do. For me, it was like trusting in my physical preparation is what helped me the most mentally.
Right. Well, that's awesome. I mean, I would tend to agree with most of those points, like in terms of how I apply them to myself. Um, there's something about kind of just shutting off like the mind in those situations when you start having doubts about it. I haven't had to deal with it from an injury perspective as much, but I imagine it's similar to the mental block that comes with like, command problems, in a way of like feeling like almost like yipped up in that it's a little scary to like really let it go.
Yeah.
I imagine that that's somewhat similar. But
Definitely.
let's kind of pivot here to like the the arm speed stuff, because you do a better job than anyone I know of like managing like your arm speed and managing your arm stress. And I'm sure that comes from having a little bit of an injury history and like, being very like focused on your workload. So can you just speak a little bit on that?
Yeah. So like, I feel like I do a pretty solid job of managing workload right now. Like, but in the past, it hasn't been that way. It's like specifically in during the COVID-19 pandemic when I was like remote training with Driveline. That was like my first like intro to like a true, I don't know, throwers warm up and getting into some of the more specific stuff we kind of do on a daily basis now. And so it had my body feeling great. So like, dude, I felt phenomenal every day. I would pull down on Monday. Tuesday, I wouldn't really be sore. And I'm like, dude, I can rip it again. And so, like, from an arm speed perspective, looking back, that's probably the reason I ended up blowing out my elbow a second time. Is just like the sheer workload on the arm, just like doing way too much every day because I felt good. Like in my
Right.
mind, it was like, oh, I feel good. I should go push it. But in reality, like I obviously learned the hard way, blew the elbow out again. But just like what the importance of managing that workload. It's like I talked about a little bit, like in my second rehab process from the elbow stuff. Like I used a pulse strap. It's honestly the best way I found to like measure intent and arm speed. So like from specifically from an arm speed perspective, like I try to follow like a high low sort of model. So like obviously your high days, like arm speed for me, I'm trying to think today I had a high day. I looked at arm speed, it was like up to 1100. Just I don't know what the units of measurement is that Pulse uses. It's not really important. But I
Yeah.
know like tomorrow from a recovery perspective, if I was 1100 today, I go out there and I'm 850 tomorrow, like obviously that's too much stress on the arm. You can dive into the acute to chronic workload ratio and really some of the chronic workload stuff. But I mean, it's besides the point. It's like common sense. Like if you're going to go do, I don't know, let's say if you're going to go run a 100-meter sprint, like in a competition on a Monday, like why would you expect to go do the same thing on a Tuesday? Like it just is counterintuitive. But in the throwing world, I feel like that's super common. Like you see guys drastically underestimate how hard they're actually trying. Like I've seen so many guys now just from my injury history, like it's what I pay attention to now. It's like, dang man, this guy threw 3 innings yesterday and he's like ripping balls at 150 feet. Like probably not the best for the arm long term. So I've been like real extreme with it at times. When I was velo building during my rehab from elbow surgery before I signed with High Point, like I followed such a strict, I guess you call it strict, but I would go maximum intensity like day one, let's say, and then day two, day three, like I don't even touch a ball just to like let the body recover. So I'm throwing like once every 3 days,
Yeah.
but like max intent on those days I am throwing. And like, I don't know, I saw bullpen velo go from like 93 to 97 in like 4 weeks. So obviously that's probably not the most practical way to do it in a season. Like you're going to
Yeah.
have to play catch of the baseball more than 2 times a week. But I mean, even now, like I'm trying to think back to what I was doing in season this year. Like I would throw 2 innings and then that next day, like just because our ego gets so involved with throwing and you're on a line with 10 guys and everybody's ripping it, like you're going to want to do the same thing. So like really being able to restrain yourself and say like, I'm going to do what's best for my body. So for me, I would either take the day completely off throwing anything or I would throw a football just because obviously the heavier the ball you're using, like the lower the arm speed is going to be. So that's something I really dove into a lot, like the relationship between ball weight and arm speed. So even if I am going to throw something like not a football on a low intensity day, it might be a heavier baseball just to maintain a low arm speed because it's going to be like you're never going to be able to move the arm as fast with an 11 ounce as you are a 5 ounce. It's just simple physics. So yeah, I mean, can't talk highly enough about the pulse strap, the importance of managing workload. Like that's like a whole thing on its own. But I recommend them to everybody. Like really diving into arm speed on what a high intensity day is, and then paying attention to what it is on a low intensity day. Like, dude, those things can have your body feeling so much better. I know me and you have talked about it because you're a guy that like today, for instance, you said you probably did a little bit too much. Like if
Right.
we were to hook a pulse strap up to you, your 80% throws are probably 90 to 95% of your max arm speed. So from
Right.
like a health perspective and a CNS recovery perspective, like it's really tough to do that. And we all of us as throwers, I haven't seen anybody that's perfect about it. Like I still have days where I overdo it. But just having those thoughts of like workload management is gonna be like the most important thing for your health. So like putting attention into learning about that and how your body responds to certain stuff, like I I, I can't stress how important it's been for me and with the guys that I've worked with, like just paying attention to how much you're doing on your low days is equally as important as paying attention to how much you're doing on your high days, in my opinion.
So here's a question for you. Okay, so you touched on the fact that at one point you were throwing like 100 pitch bullpens, and also you touched on the fact that you're on like a high-low model right now. So I've been following a high-low-low in my head, but
Yeah.
it really turns into like a high-low medium. I just have to tell myself low to get it anywhere near low. So and I've been using primarily, like you said, like heavier implements like the blue, green, or black
Mm-hmm.
plyo balls for the most part. So the question would be, it's like for somebody in a bullpen role that's having to bounce back, like day to day, but obviously you want to be safe in your training and make sure you have multiple days to recover between maximal throwing. How do you also at the same time prepare your body to be able to bounce back, in no days off or one day off?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this will get kind of into more of the weeds of workload. Just so it's just like working out. Like you want like a strong, just overall foundation. And so as throwers, our overall foundation can be defined as like chronic workload. And so the pulse strap is basically going to utilize your data from the last 30 days and like spit out a number as to like how much workload you've done on your arm in these past 30 days. So for me, I'm a reliever, so I can relate to this kind of stuff. Like having a strong foundation of workload to work with is going to have your arm more prepared to go max intensity more frequently. So back to back, like that's the toughest thing we can do as a reliever. So obviously we want days in between, like it looks pretty on paper, but like as I get further into my off season throwing and like as relievers and stuff get closer to season, I think cutting the overall volume of stuff you do down and um, focusing more on the frequency of how often you're getting to this max intensity, like needs to be trained. They're both equally as important. Like you have to know what your role as a reliever is. If you're going to go max 20 pitches, like, and you know that's going to be your role in the season, then like how often can I get to that max intent for 20 pitches? And you can train that in like a weekly scenario, like for guys that I've worked with in the past, like at first it's two longer bullpens a week, 30, 35 pitches. They learn they're going to be a reliever. You start breaking that into Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 20 pitches max intent, like let the body adapt to doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you get, like if you're throwing 3 15 pitch pens a week, like you can probably go back to back, like
Yeah.
just, yeah. So, I mean, it's all about progressing it. I mean, it's just like anything else. Like if you're going to progress something in the weight room, like you've got to prepare for it. It's the same way as a reliever. So for me, like right now, I'm going high intensity 2 days a week. As I get closer to the season, it'll be 2 bullpens a week, and then it'll be 3 bullpens a week. And then if I need to, it can be just for practice, maybe once or twice. I'll do a back to back and then give myself 2 days off. So
Mm.
it's like, especially if you're going back to back or if you're in a relieving role, like taking those days where you're down, like almost completely off is going to have you ready for the next day better than saying I'm going to do a medium intent day. If I pitched Friday, I do medium intent Saturday, ready to go Sunday. Ideally, you should do like nothing on Saturday. That's going to have you best prepared to go Sunday. If you're up on Saturday, then obviously you got to be ready. But if you know you're not pitching on a Saturday, like take the day off. Your body's going to be better ready to go Sunday than if you did 70% intensity throwing or something like that.
Yeah, that's something that I've just recently like applied. You've been telling me that for a while, kind of just had actually taking like true off days with the throwing. And it's hard because
Yeah, it is.
for the longest time, well, one, throwing is like your favorite part of the day for most pitchers, I would say.
Yeah.
And so it takes a little bit of discipline there. And then, there's been times in my career where it's like I thought if I didn't throw, I would lose feel like day to day.
Yeah.
And that I don't think that was true at all. I think that was completely mental. And so just actually, putting it into action and then being able to be like, oh, I actually feel better, and my timing feels better because I'm not just practicing fatigue movement patterns all the time, like, poor timing and things. That's been huge for me. So I appreciate your advice on that.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of that goes back, like we've talked about in the past, like intentionality in your reps, like especially when we get to high intensity throws, you only have so many that you can do while being intentional in a given day. Like me as a reliever, I can't. I mean, I could go out and throw 60 pitches, but not every pitch in a bullpen scenario is going to be intentional. Like I would much rather do 15 pitches and be completely intentional about everything I do than throw 30 pitches and only half of them be intentional. Like that intentionality piece becomes really important as a reliever because, like I said, if you are taking an off day in between, like you are limiting yourself from a sense of how many days you are throwing, but it just makes those days you are throwing a baseball that much more important, and you need to be that much more dialed into what you're doing and like have a plan every day. Like, what am I trying to attack in my pregame throwing? If there is a feel thing, like that should be of the utmost importance in your pregame throwing. It shouldn't be about just going out there and ripping balls to 120. It should be like, I'm going to focus on whatever it is. If it's slider command to a lefty, like that should be your focus in your catch play rather than like, I'm just going to go let balls eat. Like that's not getting anybody any better.
Right. No, that's a big thing. That's like, when I'm around like you, Brett Carey, these other like professionals, like there's so much more intentionality about it. And it makes me really reflect and be like, wow, like some of the things I'm doing, sometimes I can get a little bit undisciplined and just like, oh, like I really want to do this, I saw this on Instagram. I just want to try it out,
Yeah.
just having a little bit of discipline about it can go a long ways. Although I think, there are also times where you should be creative and try new things. There's also something to be said, especially as the season approaches, to having a little more discipline about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it relates to like when your season is and kind of how close you are getting to it. Like early off season, man, yeah, I'm doing a lot of experimentation stuff. I'm throwing from a bunch of different arm angles, just working on athleticism and my throwing motion and stuff. But as I get closer to spring training, like there's gonna be less time for that, and it's gonna be more focused on like pitch profiling, like dialing stuff in from that regard. So there is a time and place for exploration. I don't want to say there's not. Like I do a ton of exploration, especially in the weight room and stuff. But you have to keep in mind when your season is and keep that of the utmost priority.
Absolutely. Well, Cam, let's see. Just kind of gonna pivot real quick.
Yeah.
Let's talk about. Ooh, says I'm running out of time for unlimited meet. We'll be good. We'll see how long this will let me stay on here, but so
Yeah, I
anyway,
mean, you can always do a second call after. I've had to do that in the past where it just cuts out on time and then you just do another one after or something.
okay, perfect. Yeah, so you just talked about in the weight room, that's where you're getting more of your experimental stuff in. Talk a little bit about how your philosophy on the weight room has changed, because I know it's evolved a lot over the.
Yeah, dude. One sec. Let me get this dog to be quiet. Come here. Yeah. So yeah, man, like I mean, my philosophy on lifting's probably evolved way more than kind of throwing over the past 5 or 6 years. So going into college, like followed your just general strength building program, like hypertrophy focused, strength focused, like, and for me at the time that was probably good because I was weak and I was skinny, and so like I thought that's all you needed. I thought, dude, if I can just get my bench press and my squat up, like I'll just continue to throw harder. Cause I did it first. Like I went from 88 to 90 as a skinny high school kid to I hit 95 my first season, like from TJ. And I mean, from a training perspective, all that happened was I got big and stronger. So I was like, dude, that's the key to 100. These guys are just bigger and stronger. So like, I thought that was the key for a while. Yeah, so that was a focus for a few years. 2020, coming back from back surgery, like that rehab is all about core stability. So like that became my thing. I was like, dude, core stability, like that's going to take me to the next level. And there's a time and place for core stability, and I'll dive into that. But so that was my focus. And then when I got into rehab, like completely on my own, no influence from school, this was literally me and me only. I got really probably too far in depth on the force velocity curve.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like during that rehab, I was trying to do stuff at one end or the other. There was no room for anywhere in the middle. Like I was maxing out on front squats, like 1 rep max, like probably twice a week. I was max speed sprinting, jumping, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's when I got into like the newer wave of arm care. You can say like the dead hang. That's when I first got introduced to doing dead hangs in the weight room and handstands and really challenging shoulder strength from like a lot more aggressively than I had in the past from your traditional J bands, crossover symmetry, like YTs, eyes, 5 pound dumbbells, that kind of stuff. So that's when really got into that. And I mean, I saw another velocity jump there. And then I dove into the spinal engine and I got introduced to javelin mobility. So like thought that was going to be the most important thing. And the spinal engine theory, like it's great. I think it really applies to throwers. I was just talking with a guy about it today. Like I think the spinal engine is super, super important to the throwing motion. Having mobility and strength in different planes of motion in your spine is really important. And so that kind of takes me through 20, probably right before I signed with High Point in 21. And when I signed, I talked about throwing once every 3 days. And so because I wanted to only focus on the field performance, that was my only focus. And from a strength perspective and in the weight room, I thought the most important thing was just maintaining what I have. I knew I had a pretty strong strength base. I could front squat probably like 365 and hit a bench press PR at like 270. Like strength base was fine. So my focus was maintain that, don't lose any strength. So for me, I was hitting like lifts once every 2 weeks. Like there were times where I was lifting like once to twice a month. And it was just max out on bench, make sure I can still bench like 245 and make sure I can still front squat a fair amount of weight.
Right.
And so like, that's obviously probably not the smartest thing in the world. So I show up to affiliated ball this year and they have me lifting more times a week. And I realized I wasn't maintaining a strength base. Like I was way weaker. I lost a ton of weight. I was under 200 pounds. Velo was probably a little down from where I would have liked it. So like kind of had to develop a new process kind of on the fly, utilizing some of the stuff the Giants gave me, which is more, I would say their stuff is more geared towards almost like what I was doing in college. Like there's a big focus on strength and hypertrophy, which is fine. But I also wanted to utilize some of these concepts that I'd seen gains from in the past, like the different style of arm care. So now I'm still doing dead hangs. I'm crawling still. I'm doing hand walks. But this off season, I focused a lot more on like attacking strength from all different areas. It's less about like being really good at one or two specific lifts. It's like, I'll say I'm doing training through DAC Performance Health, and it's a different lift with a different sort of stimulus every single day. And it's like, how can I be strong in everything as opposed to being like really good at one or two things? So we'll kind of see how it pays off. Like body feels great right now. Body weight is up. I would imagine muscle mass is up. I'm hitting PRs throwing in my ramp up right now. So like, I think it might work, but like, I think that's important is like experimenting and seeing like what works for you. Cause what may work for me, like it might not work for somebody else. And it may not work for me in 2 years. Like I've talked about, dude, I've talked about 10 different philosophies in 5 minutes. Like this is a constantly evolving thing. I could be sitting here for a year from now and it's completely different what I'm doing and what I think is important. But for now, I'm trying to get as strong as I can in every different area. Mobility is still a focus, like that kind of stuff. I've gotten into impulses a lot, which you're starting to see a lot more and more of. Yeah, man, I think that kind of hits like what I've been doing. So just from a just pure programming standpoint, in 2021, I was lifting once every 2 weeks. In season this year, I was lifting like once to twice a week. Right now, I'm lifting 5 times a week. Yeah. So we'll see kind of how that progresses as I get closer to the season, because obviously throwing is the most important thing. That's what we get paid to do as pitchers. So we'll see how my body responds. But right now, like I said, I'm breaking PRs throwing wise, and I'm not really seeing any negative effects in my recovery. So like maybe this whole building a base that's just so freaking durable that the actual act of performing the throw isn't that taxing on the body. Like we'll see how it progresses. But for now, that's kind of where I'm at.
No, I mean, I think it's pretty awesome. I mean, like, I'm sure it'll evolve even more, but I mean, it's crazy what we've come from. I've been through very similar thought processes and journeys on the strength and conditioning or like the lifting mobility side of things. And it's very interesting, like how it kind of all comes full circle sometimes a little bit. But no, it's awesome. I mean, you can go, I think one thing that people need to be careful of, myself included, is falling too far into one rabbit hole at a time. Like like you mentioned, like, you know, you at one time you probably heard like the statistic that like strength stays around for 30 days. So you're like, oh, I only need to lift, you know, once or twice a month and just focus on throwing because that is the most important thing.
Yep.
But it's like, obviously, you know, it stays around a little bit, maybe, but why would we not push it a little further? So I mean, there's definitely some interesting things there.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't know. I've heard that statistic, and that did go a lot into why I was lifting so infrequently back in 21. Um, yeah, dude, it's interesting. We'll see where it evolves to. Like, we'll see what I end up thinking a year from now. But I don't know. I think there is like, I think it's sometimes we treat throwers like they're a little more fragile than they tend to be. Like,
Right.
I think throwers should train as any other athlete would. Um, and the body can handle a lot. Like, speaking personally, like I've been through a lot, but I'm 25 and I'm still getting stronger. Like, and I've had 3 surgeries in the past 5 years, but I mean, it can handle a lot and rebound from a lot. So like continuing to challenge your body and push for whether it's new strength or speed kind of marks. I think that stuff's important, man.
Yeah, no, 100%. My